Окей, добрий вечір, good evening. Зараз починаємо наш вебінар. Сьогодні вечір маємо цікаву тему про вас, про безпеку в Онтаріо для публіки в різних сферах. Мене звати Ігор Михальчишин. My name is Igor Michalchishyn. I'm the Executive Director of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress. We have an interesting presentation from you tonight from the Ministry of Public and Business Service Delivery on consumer protection in Ontario. But for those of our friends who are not in Ontario, I think you'll definitely learn some interesting things as well. Я хочу сказати декотрі речі перед тим, що ми починаємо. Ми маємо пані Івану перекладати в українській мові, щоб ви не слухали мене. Якщо ви хочете, бажаєте по-українськи слухати, прошу натисніть вниз вашого екрану на кнопку на Ukrainian channel. So I'm just explaining, Anthony, that people can switch into Ukrainian to hear Ivana's excellent translation of your presentation. Якщо ви маєте запитання, if you have questions or comments, you can use the Q&A function and we'll be able to see those. Це можна написати питання чи коментарі зараз під час презентації або після. І після презентації назначимо час, щоб подивитися на ваші запитання і відповісти, де можливо. Хочу подякувати Канадській українській фундації, що нас підтримує в цім проєкті. So thank you to the Canada-Ukraine Foundation, who is a supporter of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress in this project of expert insights. And I'll post in the chat for all of our viewers the upcoming list of webinars that we're coming to in our spring, almost summer session. So we'll be wrapping up in the next couple of months, but we have lots of interesting topics. So, excuse me. Якщо ви змінили вашу мову на англійську або на українську, зараз починаємо. So we'll be starting right now. I want to introduce Anthony Fimiani from the Ministry of Public and Business Service Delivery of Ontario, who's going to talk to us about consumer protection. So Anthony, over to you.
Thank you, Ihor. Welcome, everyone. I hope that you'll enjoy the presentation today. I am Anthony Fimiani. I'm a consumer services officer. I've been a consumer services officer for a bit around 7 years now. I've thoroughly enjoyed the work that I've done over the last 7 years, and it's been an absolute pleasure serving the people of Ontario. I've had the pleasure of educating people on our toll-free number when people call into our office, and I've had the pleasure of mediating complaints when people make complaints to our office as well. So I'm just going to get started then. Let's see, so this is a brief overview of what our presentation will entail today. So we're going to have an overview of consumer protection, a section about knowing your rights as a consumer, a section about contracts, cooling off periods, buying from a salesperson at your door, shopping in stores online, hiring a mover, hiring a contractor, renting or buying a car, towing and storage rules. So I hope that these topics are of interest to you. These are some topics that are going to be pretty common among the complaints that we receive at our office. And there's some important things to keep in mind when you're dealing with some of the industries we'll talk about today. So here, Consumer Protection Ontario is a program through which the Ministry of Public and Business Service Delivery and other public organizations known as administrative authorities promote consumer rights and public safety. The ministry and these administrative authorities enforce a number of Ontario's consumer protection laws and public safety laws, investigate alleged violations, and handle complaints. We offer information on consumer rights and public safety and tell you where to go if you have a complaint or a dispute with a certain type of business. This presentation will provide information you need to know when buying products and services in Ontario. It gives examples of questions that you can ask to help you become a smarter consumer. So a little bit about who we are and what we do. We provide primarily mediation services where there's a complaint that's come in from a customer who feels that they've been wronged in some kind of way. So that could look like an unfair practice in the form of a misrepresentation by a business. One of the more common types of misrepresentations that we get has to do with door-to-door sales where there's the sale of furnaces, air conditioners, water heaters. That's one of the number one types of complaints where we see businesses misrepresenting themselves as members of the government or members of your company that you'd be familiar with, Enbridge Gas, that provides natural gas. And there's often claims of rebates and that kind of thing. So that's one of the main things that we get complaints about, but also a wide range of different types of complaints that range from renovations that may include a renovator who's been paid a large deposit that then walks off the job and does not complete the job, or it could even stem into some of the industries that we specifically license, such as collection agencies, payday lenders. We also regulate bailiffs and consumer reporting agencies. So there's a very wide range of different industries that we take complaints about. There's, in addition to that, a wide range of things that we do not take complaints about. We do not take complaints about things that are regulated by a regulator that's specifically designed to regulate a particular industry. For example, purchasing a vehicle from a dealership would fall under our administrative authority called OMVIC, the Ontario Motor Vehicle Industry Council. There's specific regulations that surround the sale of vehicles by dealerships. So that's something that we would not take complaints about. We would refer those complaints to whichever body would take those kind of complaints. Another example would be if it were a matter of fraud in the sense of something that doesn't involve a consumer transaction. So say, for example, you might be familiar with getting calls from unknown numbers that are trying to fish for certain types of information, like your credit card number, your social insurance number. That type of thing would be handled by the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center. And that's a call center that's operated by the RCMP and the OPP. So while there are, my point in explaining all of this, while there are a number of things, a very wide range of things that we take complaints about, like movers, renovations, towing, car repairs, all of those kind of things we do take complaints about, there's also a wide range of things that have a specific regulator that's designed to take complaints about that topic. Okay. And again, like I said, mediation is primarily what we do, where we attempt to facilitate a discussion between a company and a customer in the hopes that both parties can find a way to work things out together, to find common ground and to resolve the complaint. But, in addition to that, there's also different services that we provide in the form of inspections where we may not have necessarily received a complaint about a company, but we are trying to proactively look into the practice of the company and see are there areas where we can educate them and try to bring them into compliance with the legislation that we're looking at, primarily the Consumer Protection Act, but we might also be looking at the Collection Debt Settlement Services Act or the Consumer Reporting Act. And lastly, investigations is essentially our final function, where we usually will have received a number of complaints that's demonstrating a trend of non-compliance with a particular business. And where we see that there's a large volume of complaints that perhaps may have a high dollar value in dispute, that's where we would be looking to have an investigator take a more thorough look at the business, gather evidence, and interview and take statements from customers who've been taken potentially advantage of by that company, and then presenting a case to, or presenting that information to our legal counsel, who would then make a decision of whether or not they would want to have the government press charges against the company that's being investigated. So that's more rare. It is a function that we perform, but generally speaking, the bulk of the work that we do at our office, Consumer Protection Ontario, is the mediation services, where we're trying to facilitate conversations, and we're not necessarily implementing direct penalties to the business. There is no penalty for participating in mediation, but the hope being that we can help both parties resolve the matter together. But of course, there are some actors, some businesses out there that mediation is not suitable for, that we receive a very high volume about complaints from about those businesses. And where that's the case, we have investigations for that. So that's a brief overview about what it is that we do. And let me know when you're ready to move to the next one. Next slide. Perfect. All right, so this slide is about knowing your rights. It's very important to know your rights as a consumer, and obviously there's a lot of rights that you have that you may not be familiar with. So I hope that this presentation will provide you a bit of information on that. The Consumer Protection Act 2002 is the law that covers many of the things you are going to buy or rent in Ontario. It is meant to make things fair for everyone, consumers and for businesses. Knowing how to protect yourself against dishonest practices can help you save money and avoid being disappointed or becoming a victim of a fraud or a scam. Now, the main thing I want to get across here is the importance of reading your contract. And, you know, it's very important when you're presented with a document that you read through it thoroughly enough to understand what it is that's being presented to you and what your rights are to cancel, because there's a very big misconception that exists in Ontario where people feel that they have like a standard right to cancel across the board in all scenarios, which is not the case. So while we have various consumer protection rights that include things like cooling off periods, a short period of time where you have the right to cancel for any reason, and I'll get into that as the presentation goes on. But while we have those kinds of rights in some scenarios, there is no blanket right to cancel in all scenarios. It's specific to whatever has happened. And it's specific to the rights that are listed out in the Act that give you your consumer protection rights. So primarily, you want to make sure that you are reading thoroughly whatever document is presented to you so that you can avoid needing to have access to these rights in the first place. If there's something that you're not comfortable with when you're reading a contract, do not sign it. Be very careful and only sign something if you are comfortable with whatever it is that you're signing. I can't stress that enough. And I'll give you an example of there's an operation of businesses that essentially sell cosmetic products. I won't give names, but essentially it's even operating in malls across Ontario, where essentially they'll lure in customers by rubbing creams on their hands and that kind of thing, and you know, making all sorts of kind of assertions that the customer that they're dealing with is not beautiful, that they need these products in order to look beautiful, or that it's going to help them look younger, that kind of thing. And these customers, through those kinds of undue pressure and pressure tactics, are lured in into signing very expensive contracts. And we're talking tens of thousands of dollars here. And this can happen in, just a walk in the mall that you had no intention of signing a large contract. This can happen to you if you're not careful. So, while we're here talking about our consumer protection rights, again, I can't stress enough the importance of reading your contract. Okay. Some of the rights, though, that you have access to essentially include being provided written disclosures in many cases. There are some exceptions to that. Say, for example, if you go to the grocery store and buy, your groceries, you're not going to be signing a formal document for that. But in other cases, so for example, a gym contract, or if you're signing an agreement for a renovation, there are a set of disclosures that the business is required to provide you under Ontario's Consumer Protection Act. And those disclosures need to be provided in writing in the form of a contract. In addition to that, there's cooling off period that we'll talk about in a minute. There's also the right to cancel an agreement if there's been an unfair practice that's taken place. So an unfair practice is essentially if a business has intentionally tried to deceive their customer. That would give the customer a right to cancel that contract. Right. And the main way that we would recommend that a customer try to make access of their consumer protection rights, if they feel that their rights have been violated, would be to write to the business, outline to the business what your concerns are, what you'd like them to do, and then try to negotiate with the business as best as you can. And here we go. So this page is about contracts. So we talked about that briefly just now, but a contract is an agreement, written or verbal, where one person receives a product or service from a business in exchange for payment or something else of value. Ontario consumer law requires written contracts for certain products and services. For example, you must be given a written contract if you are spending more than $50 to buy something at home from a salesperson who comes to your door, get a magazine subscription, or hire a business to move your furniture. Right? So the specific types of contracts that need, the specific types of agreements that need a contract include what's considered a direct agreement, or a door-to-door sales type of agreement, in other words. A future performance agreement, which essentially is something where the business is going to provide something or some service to the customer in the future. Personal development agreements, so things like gym contracts would also require a contract. Those are the types of agreements that would require a written contract. Also, timeshares is another one. Be very careful of timeshares as well. cooling off periods. So the Ontario consumer law gives consumers time to change their mind and back out of certain contracts in certain situations. This is called a cooling off period. Examples of when you are given time to cancel a contract are when you buy something from a salesperson who comes to your door, join a fitness club or gym, buy a condo, typically a newly built condo from a developer. So and I want to stress this, that there are only a very few set type of agreements that allow you to cancel in this cooling off period. For the purposes of the Consumer Protection Act, the cooling off period is 10 days, and that's calendar days. It's not business days. So it includes weekends. Now, when you are provided your contract, if you have a right to cancel using a cooling off period, that allows you to cancel the agreement for any reason. You do not have to give a reason. And I recommend, if you're exercising your right to cancel using a cooling off period, that you put it in writing. Very important to put it in writing. If you do not put it in writing, technically the Consumer Protection Act still allows you to cancel the contract. However, you will not be able to prove that you canceled your agreement. So it is very important that whenever you are requesting to cancel an agreement, that you put that cancellation in writing, or you have the business send you confirmation in writing that the agreement has been canceled. Cooling off periods will need to be disclosed on the contract with a mandatory statement that is copy and pasted from our Consumer Protection Act onto the contract. And that will disclose to you what your right is when exercising your right to cancel. People are not going to instinctively know that they have a cooling off period, so our legislation requires that it is disclosed to them in writing if they have that as an option for them. And again, door-to-door sales are probably the one of the most primary ways in which people would have a cooling off period, or where you would see cooling off periods. But if you physically go to the business and sign a contract at their business, unless you are signing a timeshare or a personal development agreement like a gym contract or a fitness contract, then you do not have a cooling off period in those cases. So, for example, if you were going to meet with a contractor at their place of business to do a renovation agreement, and you sign the agreement at their place of business, you would not have a cooling off period. Likewise, if you were to enter into an agreement over the internet, you would not have a cooling off period in that case either. So there are some key types of transactions where you do not have a right to cancel in the 10-day cooling off period, but there are some important types of agreements that do give you a 10-day cooling off period to cancel. And again, it's for any reason. You do not have to give a reason as to why you're canceling. Buying from a salesperson at your door. So as a consumer, you must be given a written contract when a salesperson comes to your door. You have the right to cancel a contract from the day you enter into the contract until 10 days after you receive a written copy of the contract. You can cancel the contract up to 1 year after entering into the contract if the business or salesperson made a false or misleading statement about the contract before or while you entered into the contract. Certain products and services cannot be offered or sold at your home unless you contact the business first, with certain exceptions. These are furnaces, air conditioners, air cleaners, air purifiers, water heaters, water treatment devices, water purifiers, water filters, water softeners, duct cleaning services. So I'm going to touch a bit on that last part of the slide. It was in March of 2019 that the government realized, based on the calls that we were receiving and the complaints that we were receiving, that that industry, which we call the HVAC industry, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, that industry was extremely problematic and continues to be extremely problematic. Unfortunately, this, again, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, that this is an industry where there's many misrepresentations that are being made to customers, including that they're members of the government when they're not, or that they are representatives of the gas company when they're not, and that you need to install this equipment when you do not, or that you need to replace equipment that does not actually need to be replaced. So it can be very confusing and also very enticing when one of these people shows up at your door and makes these assertions and lies that you need certain equipment when you don't, because they will often have things like Ontario or Canada in their business name, and that makes them sound very official. And that is something that you should be cautious of. Just because it has Ontario in its name does not mean that the company is a representative of the Ontario government. That's very important to keep in mind. So what the government did in March of 2019 was the government implemented a ban on unsolicited door-to-door sales. Now, what that means is a business is not allowed to show up at your door to solicit you for these types of products. And again, I want to be clear though, it is only for this specific range of products. It does not include everything. It's only targeted at furnaces, air conditioners, air cleaners, air purifiers, and the list that you see there. So the types of equipment that we need to heat our homes and to heat our water and that kind of thing. So the businesses are still allowed to sell you these products, but they are not allowed to solicit you at your home for these products. Obviously, these are still products that we need to be installed in our homes. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to survive in this country. But, the door-to-door unfair practices that we see so often is something that the government attempted to address by banning unsolicited door-to-door sales. So if your agreement is made under these circumstances, the business is required to provide you with a mandatory document that outlines what the new rules are that came about as of 2019. And you should be very careful of, if you are presented this document, to actually read that document, because what we see is that, we know the intention behind the document outlines what the rules are, that these businesses are not allowed to just show up at your house and try to sell you these kind of products that are banned from being sold in that way. We are still seeing people are signing that document as if they had requested the business to come to the home, which is allowed. So be very careful of, if you have a visit from an individual who claims to be from the gas company or claims to be from the government and is recommending that you install certain types of products like furnaces, water heaters, and air conditioners. I guess I will mention one other thing that makes this very problematic, that the government is looking at banning as well, is a notice of security interest. So the notice of security interest is sometimes referred to as nosies. This is a tool that exists that allows businesses to register essentially a lien on your property for these kind of products. Now, the government again is looking at banning notice of security interest, and the significance of them is that if you have one of these agreements in place and you have this equipment in your home, you are likely going to be renting this equipment from the business, or the equipment is going to be financed. So you don't technically, you haven't technically paid for all of that, the entirety of the contract. So the business will place a notice of security interest on your home, which will prevent you from selling your home unless you satisfy that notice of security interest. So that could present a rather, large bill for you. If you were to go to sell your home, you may be hit with $10,000, $15,000 that you would have to pay out for these very expensive contracts for, the air conditioner that was put into your home by one of these companies. So you want to be very, very careful to avoid having entered into one of these kind of agreements, because it could present you in a situation where you have a very large bill when you're going to sell your home. And at that point, you may be inclined to just pay that out. Ihor, I hope you're okay. Bless you. But you may be in a situation where, you are presented with this large bill and you may just want to pay it to satisfy the sale of your home, right? So be very careful to avoid entering into these agreements where somebody just shows up at your door and tries to sell you these kinds of products with various misrepresentations. So buying products and services in stores, shop smart and ask questions. Research the product or service before you buy to compare quality and prices. Ask friends and family for advice. Get information in writing, such as estimates for services, delivery dates, etc., and keep your receipts and paperwork. For example, warranties. Beware of sales pitches that offer cash deals to avoid paying sales taxes. Search the consumer beware list. So, with respect to the cash deals, that's something that is often very enticing, where, things are so expensive now. We want to try to save money where we can. And when presented with this opportunity to pay by cash and save some money, that can be very, very attractive. But it's very important to be mindful and to be very careful of that kind of activity, because, the days of dealing with businesses where you could, enter into an agreement and pay cash and, get what you receive, those days are essentially over. Businesses are much more unscrupulous, I feel, than they were many years ago. If they are offering you an opportunity to pay by cash and to save money on taxes, what you could be setting yourself up for is a big disappointment where you've paid a substantial amount of money, but you have nothing to prove that you've paid the money that you did. So that's why things like credit card transactions or debit card transactions, I would kind of advise against, but I mean, you could do that. Money, cash payments without a receipt puts you in a very peculiar situation in which you have no paper trail. the business very easily can deny that they took that money from you, and you have nothing to show what it is that you paid for. So if you don't get what you paid for, or if you get something else, or if you get a product of lower quality than you were than what you paid for, all of those kind of issues you would not be able to resolve because you've paid in cash and you have nothing now, right? So that's something very important to keep in mind. Um, Make sure to get a receipt. If you do not get a receipt, there is a phone number that you can call to report to the Canada Revenue Agency. They have a national lead center that you can report suspected tax evasion. And that's another important factor that, by making cash deals and not getting receipts, we're allowing for the industries that partake in that to evade paying taxes. And, those are the taxes that provide you services so that our society can function. So very important. Now we'll also talk about the consumer beware list. The consumer beware list is a publicly available search engine that is available online. If you type into your browser consumer beware list, you will be able to find it. And what it is a list that outlines which companies have ignored our office, Consumer Protection Ontario, and it will flag which companies have been charged through an investigation by our office as well. So these are companies that we feel that the public should be careful, of working with. We don't necessarily take the stance that you should never do business with these companies, but you should be very careful of dealing with the company if they have ignored the government or if they have been charged by the government for um, one thing or another through an investigation through our office. So we would recommend to be very, very careful when dealing with those kinds of companies. If they're not responding to the government, they may not respond to you. If they've been charged by the government, there's a good reason for that. There's going to be a trend of noncompliance that we've seen where the business is taking advantage of customers. So we would like the public to be aware that this is a tool that they can access. If you're about to do a transaction with a business and you're not sure about them, please go to the consumer beware list, type in the name of the company. Using fewer words will generate more results and create a better search. So I would be less specific. If the company's name had 3 words in it, I would just put the first word, and then that will give you a wider range of searches so that you can search the whole list as opposed to just that one specific search. And if the name of the company appears on the list, you can click on that and it'll show you why they're on the list, if they've ignored our office or if they've been charged by us. And more information about buying products and services in stores. So without a receipt, like I said, you do not have proof of purchase, so it'll be more difficult to get help or to make a case in court. You cannot claim your warranty if your item breaks down or fails to do what was promised. So again, very important to make sure that you get a receipt so that you have that proof that you purchased the product that you did and that you paid the amount that you did and on the day that you did. Without having that proof of payment, you could be in a very difficult spot. So this is a slide we have here on online shopping. More and more people are buying products and services over the internet. Another term for this is online shopping. Ask the right questions when shopping online. Does the company's website provide basic information, the seller's name, and contact information for the business, such as address and phone number? If it's lacking that kind of basic information, you should be very careful of dealing with that company. If they don't want to disclose that kind of information, why is it that they don't want to disclose that? Maybe they're trying to get into transactions, but then not offer the level of customer service that one would expect. Do I know what I'm paying for? The right product information should be provided. For example, information on size, materials, or color options, and warranties or guarantees. Ensure your credit card number and personal financial information, such as password, usernames, those kind of things, are being sent over a secure and protected website and server. A secure website will begin with HTTPS. So be careful of that as well. You want to be careful of the information that you provide and who you provide it to, because you could be in a more difficult situation, especially if you're giving that information over the phone. Be very careful of the calls that you may receive from people who claim to be from sources like your bank or from the government. These are not places that are going to call you over the phone out of the blue. So be very careful of providing your personal financial information, and especially not your social insurance number. Hiring a mover. Moving day can be stressful. Finding the right mover can help you avoid delays and extra costs. What you need to know: check the Canadian Association of Movers, good practice guidelines for Canadian movers, and the Consumer Beware List. The Canadian Association of Movers will put out periodically updates of businesses that they've been receiving calls about. And that's a very helpful tool to have. Movers can be particularly unscrupulous, where we see complaints that range from holding goods to ransom, where they have initiated the move, taken your items, but then once they have possession of your items, claim that you need to pay more money than what they initially disclosed to you. That's something you should be very careful of by doing research on what company you're hiring. And again, Canadian Association of Movers is a great place to start your search, just to be wary of the companies that they've been getting reports on. Another thing that we hear very frequently with movers is where they will give you an estimate of how much money it's going to cost for the move that you're hiring them to do. But then once they weigh your items in person, then they will tell you that the move is going to cost far more, thousands of dollars more than what they initially disclosed to you. So those kind of companies you want to be very careful of. At that point where you're presented with a much higher bill, but you have to move on that day, there's perhaps obligations that you have, or a place where you need to be at a particular time in your new home. It could be very difficult for you, where you may feel pressured to pay that money anyways. So be very careful of these companies, and the best way to avoid getting in these situations is to do really good research on the company that you're hiring. Check reviews online. Check the Canadian Association of Movers website and educate yourself. Learn, perhaps by reaching out to family members or friends who have used a moving company in the past. Maybe coworkers have used a moving company in the past that they might recommend, but do your due diligence and research on the company that you're hiring before you hire them. Very important. And when you have a short list of movers, ask for written estimates from at least 3 of them. Try to get a number of different estimates so that way you find a fair price, but also that you understand what the industry is generally charging for the move. If you get one price from a company, you might be thinking that that company's taking advantage of you, but if you get a few different prices, you might be seeing that this is actually around the price that's fair for these types of transactions. Ask for all-in quotes that identifies a per hour labor rate and the number of movers who will be involved. Make sure that the quote is provided is part of any agreement you sign. That way you cannot be charged more than 10% above the quoted price. So try to get a quote and try to make sure that that quote is part of your agreement as opposed to not being part of your agreement. So more on hiring a mover, what you need to know before signing a contract with a mover, check to be sure that the contract includes the mover's mailing and or email address, name and phone numbers to contact, itemized list of services, prices for each service, supplies to be provided, key dates, total amount payable. Now, these are not things that are exclusive to movers. A lot of these disclosures are things that you should be looking for in most kinds of contracts that you sign that require your signature. An itemized list of service and the price for each service is something that in many cases is required by law. It is not enough for the business to simply give you a subtotal and say these are the list of services that we're going to provide you, and here's the total cost that you're going to have to pay for them. That is not enough in many cases. What the business needs to do, if there are multiple elements of a job or there are multiple items that they are going to be providing to you, they need to itemize it in the sense that the first service is going to cost one thing, the second part of the service is going to cost another number, and so on and so forth. So if they're going to, for example, do a renovation, like an interior renovation that includes multiple parts of the job, if they're going to renovate your stairwell, what's the cost just for the stair part of the renovation? Or if they're going to be installing cabinets, what's the cost for the cabinet renovation part of it? If they're going to be doing flooring, what's the cost for the flooring, right? Each element of the job needs an itemized list with price points for each part of that job so that if something were to go wrong for that part of the job, we have an objective look of what is being charged for that portion of the job. It takes away some of the subjectivity with what it is that they're charging. So be very careful and make sure that when you receive a contract that it includes these types of things, like the contact information for the business and the itemized list of services and products that they're providing to you. Hiring a contractor. When a renovation is done right, and it can improve the look and value of your home, choosing a contractor carefully can help your plans go smoothly. And what you need to know, ask neighbors and friends for advice and check the consumer beware list, like I mentioned before. When you have a short list of contractors, ask for written estimates from at least 3 of them. Make sure the estimate is included as part of the written contract. This way, the contractor cannot charge more than 10% above the estimated cost. So renovations, can often be a very stressful thing if you're not hiring the right company. So be very careful of which company you're hiring, do your research before hiring them, and make sure that you get a written contract that has clear disclosures of what it is that they're going to be doing for you, when they're going to be doing it, what each part of the job is going to cost, and that it has clear terms and conditions that you understand. If you do not understand the terms and conditions of the agreement, do not sign the agreement. Ask the contractor to clarify and provide perhaps written clarification of what their policies mean if you don't understand what they mean. I will give you an example of a mediation that I did a number of years ago where a lady had an agreement to renovate her roof. Her roof was quite old. She waited longer than is recommended. I think her roof was about 20 years old, if not more. And the issue in this situation was that she had signed the contract but did not read the contract. If she had read the contract, she would have understood that the contract disclosed that if the business needs to replace the plywood underneath the shingles of the roof, that there would be an additional cost for the plywood replacement. And she did not read that. And she was shocked when there was a much more considerable cost being presented to her when the work was finished. And as part of that mediation, we were able to get a resolution in this case. I made the argument to the business in mediation that the disclosures perhaps could have been more clear. Maybe they could have been more prominent, which is a requirement of the Consumer Protection Act that if disclosures are made, that they are clear, prominent, and comprehensible. And in this case, they could have been more clear. And in this case, I think probably the main reason why we got a resolution was that the consumer had withheld some part, majority part of the payment. And the business, in an effort of wanting to get paid for at least some part of what they did accept a lower amount than what they were initially charging for. But to be completely honest with you, this customer really should have been more careful in reading her contract so that she could have avoided this situation from happening in the first place. It would have been less of a shock to her had she read the contract and understood and done a bit more research that with the age of her roof that this was very likely going to happen, that they were going to need an additional cost, and perhaps she could have asked the business to estimate what it would cost if they did have to replace the plywood underneath the shingles as well, which she did not do. So try to be careful when dealing with businesses that are offering you renovation services so that you know exactly what it is that you're paying for and when they're going to be providing the service that they're providing, and that you understand all of the terms and conditions that are set out in the agreement. So more on hiring a contractor, what you need to know, check if the contractor has a permit or license. Check with your municipality about the permits you'll need and how much they cost. Unless specified in your contract, it's up to you to secure these permits. So certain types of jobs may require municipal permits, and that's going to depend on the municipality that you live in. So every municipality is different. Um, especially Toronto is going to have a lot more different rules than your average municipality just by merit of how large Toronto is. There's a lot more things that Toronto has kind of oversight for at a municipal level. So make sure to check with your municipality when considering doing this kind of work. Avoid under the table cash deals. Reputable companies meet all legal requirements, including collecting and paying applicable taxes. always insist on a receipt. Paying a large amount in cash can get you in a really, really difficult spot where you're expecting the renovation work to be completed, but the business has not given you a paper trail, and you now have nothing to show for the very large amount that you've paid. And I've seen some really shocking amounts being paid in cash, tens of thousands of dollars paid in cash, where the consumer has only a handful of text messages to rely on. Not advisable. Make sure that you have a contract, and if you make any kind of cash payment, that you get receipts. But for this kind of renovation, like significant renovation work, cash deals not advisable at all, because of the nature of which it is very difficult to pinpoint how much you actually paid to the business. So be very careful of that. Keep down payments to a minimum. This is important. We recommend no more than 10%. If you pay a very large down payment, you run the risk of the business being paid enough money where it makes more sense for the business financially. Not, it doesn't make moral sense, but morals don't really come into the picture of some of these businesses, as some of these businesses are very nefarious and unscrupulous. But where they've been paid a very large amount, it becomes financially a better move for the business to just move on to the next project. And it can be very difficult for you as a consumer to access your rights. You could in this case, you could make a complaint to our office, and we can, in many cases, attempt to offer mediation services. But with the kinds of businesses that take the money and run, it can be very difficult to seek resolutions with those kind of companies, as it may require you to take the matter to court, and you may not have the time to take the matter to court. You may not have the funds to take the matter to court. There are services that are available to you that will offer pro bono legal advice. There's Legal Aid Ontario that can provide a 30-minute consultation for free if you have an issue that requires some legal assistance. But you're not always entitled to free legal representation. And specifically in renovations, if you're hiring a renovator to do a significant renovation, you probably can't afford your own legal advice. So you could be in a situation where you may have a large legal bill to your legal advisor that you may not be in a position like that. It may not be a great position for you to be in. So you want to be very careful of that. If you sign a contract in your home and later change your mind for a renovation, you can cancel within 10 calendar days by contacting the company and giving them a written notice of cancellation. So this is a renovation agreement signed in your home with the salesperson in your home. You have that 10-day cooling off period to cancel for any reason. You do not have to give them a reason, but we strongly recommend that you put that cancellation in writing. Otherwise, the business may, tell you over the phone that, okay, your agreement is canceled, but in reality, they are just telling you what you want to hear, and later will try to charge you anyways, and you will have nothing to show for it. So you need to have something in writing if you're going to be canceling an agreement with a cooling off period, or whenever you're going to be canceling a significant contract. Renting a car, if you have a driver's license that is valid in Ontario and have a credit card, you may rent a car from local car rental dealers. Ask the right questions. Before you rent a car, how much money do I have to deposit, and what will be my total renting cost? Do I have to pay for the fuel I use, or is it included in the cost? Is car insurance included in the cost? What happens if I do not return the car on time? Where will I pick up and drop off the car? Buying or leasing a car, choose a registered dealer. Whether you are buying or leasing a new or used car, you are better protected if you buy or lease from a dealer registered with the Ontario Motor Vehicle Industry Council. When you buy or lease from a registered dealer, the Ontario Motor Vehicle Industry Council, Motor Vehicle Dealers Compensation Fund, may give you some or all of your money back if you have certain difficulties with your car or the dealer. Buying from a private seller. Here are some things to consider if buying from a private seller, and this is in the respect to buying a vehicle from a private seller. You must be given a used vehicle information package. Take the car to a licensed independent mechanic to inspect it for possible problems. Always ask to take the car for a drive before you buy it. And do not transfer your money to the car owner when buying cars through online websites. Always meet the owner in person when you are buying a car. Bring a friend or relative to see the car. Be very, very careful of buying a vehicle from a private seller. Private sellers are not going to have the kind of customer service that we expect, and you're taking a risk when buying a vehicle from a private seller. You might get all of this information that they're required to disclose to you and still have difficulties with the vehicle. So, and if you're in a situation where you do have difficulties, you would have to take that individual to court, potentially small claims court, or maybe superior court, depending on the value of the vehicle. And taking an individual to court can often be very, very difficult because you may not have all of the contact information that you would need to take them to court. So best to avoid court where possible and do your research and avoid buying from private sellers. Although it is, it is allowed to buy, you are allowed to buy vehicles from private sellers. It is something you should be very careful of doing. People, often hope that they have certain protections that they would have when they're buying a used or new vehicle from a dealer, but in the case where you're buying it from a private seller, you do not have those same rights. So you are taking a significant risk there. Towing, hang on. Just know what to do when calling a tow truck. Step one, before an accident or breakdown happens, ask your insurance company about towing and where to take your car to be repaired. If you have not done step one and you are in an accident or your car breaks down, check to see if the tow truck has a municipal license number written on the side. If it does, write it down. And step three, ask these questions before signing a contract with a tow truck driver. How much will towing cost? Where will my car be towed? Can you take the vehicle to my preferred repair shop? And when your car breaks down, get all the information in writing. Avoid paying cash. Get proof that you paid, for example, a receipt. Another thing to keep in mind with a towing agreement is that you always, by law, have the right to pay by credit card. You do not have to pay them cash. We don't recommend that you pay by cash. Having a paper trail along with the access to a dispute process if something were to go wrong through your credit card company would be helpful for you. So avoid paying cash and do not feel pressured to pay cash if a business asks you for cash. And here's a page on how to file a complaint with us. So step one, inform the business of your complaint. You should advise the business of your complaint by letter, email, or by phone before filing a complaint with us. We recommend writing to the business before you file a complaint with us. That is essentially a requirement for us that we see that you've written to the business, outlining what your concerns are, what it is that you want them to do, and then after you've written to them, do your best to try to negotiate with them and reach a settlement that works for both of you. If you advise the business by phone, make sure to note the date and the details of the conversation. But really, phone call conversations can only go so far sometimes. Having things in writing is best. Step two, submit a complaint to us. If the business does not resolve your complaint after the business receives your letter, email, or phone call, you can file a complaint with us. Step three, after you submit your complaint, we will contact you by email, mail, or phone within 15 business days, and complaints will be examined on a case-by-case basis in order to determine what action, if any action, needs to be taken. And again, primarily what we offer is mediation services where we facilitate a discussion between the company and the customer in the hopes that both parties can find a way to work things out together. If we can reach a settlement and mediation, then that would be recorded in what's called a record of discussion document that would outline what each party has agreed to. And then we would provide a copy of that record of discussion to both parties. The expectation from there would be that both parties follow the record of discussion and then go their separate ways. And here's a page on our contact information if you need to file a complaint with us for one thing or another. You can reach us by telephone. You can send us an email. Our website is available online where you can submit a complaint directly through our website. If you have questions about your consumer protection rights, feel free to ask. We are available between the hours of 8:30 to 5 o'clock, and we're available weekdays, not weekends. We'd be happy to assist you if you give us a call. And that is it for my presentation. I can field a few questions before I go.
Okay, Anthony, thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. I know I learned a lot as a resident of Ontario, and I'm sure our Ukrainian newcomers have as well. And thank you to Ivana for the great translation. I think your presentation has been very detailed, so I don't see any questions in the chat, but I'll just remind people one more time. Якщо ви маєте запитання, спитатися, або ви можете написати в Q&A, щоб ми прочитали, які вони є. Зараз в нас немає питання, бо презентація була досить детальна. Anthony, I just wanted to maybe I'll ask one question just before we wrap up.
Sure.
Are there any trends you've noticed that have come in terms of complaints or issues that Ukrainian newcomers have been facing, or newcomers in particular?
Newcomers in particular. So it's a good question. I would say that one thing we see with respect to newcomers, or not even necessarily newcomers, but people who are not comfortable with the English language, is that they are more prone to being taken advantage of by people who speak their own language. So where, you know, a company has come to the door, or where I think particularly in terms of door-to-door sales, there is a lot more trust where both parties speak the same language in their home language. And just because they speak your language does not mean that they are trustworthy. That's very important to keep in mind. I've seen too many situations where the same explanation comes from the customer saying, well, I trusted them because they spoke my language.
Right.
That doesn't mean that they're trustworthy. It just means that they speak your language. That's all it means. So make sure to do your research, check online what the reviews say about their business, and be critical about the reviews that you're reading. What level of complaint are you seeing for the people that are not happy with the service? Is it a simple customer service type of issue, or is it I didn't get what I paid for, or I didn't receive any service? Those are more serious complaints than maybe someone who's just disgruntled about the customer service,
Right.
right? So be very careful and be critical of the information that you're looking at, and especially for newcomers to Canada and for people who are not comfortable with the English language, be very careful of people who speak your language. I can't stress that enough, because that's, I would say, probably the number one thing that I see impact people here that fall into that situation.
Very interesting. I had not thought of it that way, but sure, it could be very easily manipulated or, uh, yeah, as you said, a very easy situation to fall a victim to if somebody's promising you that access. Okay, I don't see any questions from our guests, but we'll thank you, Anthony, for your excellent presentation. It'll be available on our YouTube channel tomorrow. So thank you to you and your team for doing the work that you do. We again we'll keep the contact information up. If you have a question, you can contact Anthony and his team there. And we're going to wish everybody good night. So dobranic, good night.
Excellent. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great night.